Greetings, internet friends. Today, let's embark on a captivating odyssey into the intriguing realms of the UFO phenomenon and its profound influence on the tapestry of human culture. Now, let me unveil the significance of the colours green and purple and how their importance in our history might be influenced by extraterrestrial forces. Traditionally, these colours have symbolised royalty. Roman emperors adorned themselves in purple to signify their ascent to power, while green has been traditionally worn by priests in the Catholic Church. The theme of green and purple begins in our story with Ted Rice, who recounts instances of these colours prevailing during his own abductions. So significant is their influence that he chose to feature them on the cover of his book, Masquerade of Angels. Ted recalls a particular abduction where he encountered a reptilian entity adorned in regal green and purple robe. The first time that he remembered seeing the colours purple and green together was during the very young cotton patch abduction that happened on his grandmother's farm. He was taken on board a very large ship that he classified as a mothership. He was put to death and cloned a new body. When that procedure was completed, he was ushered onto a stage of a large auditorium that seated at a minimum of 1,000 non-human creatures. The entity that ushered him onto the stage of the auditorium was a short figure of about 4 feet. He wore what seemed to be a jumpsuit-looking attire of blue and white, with the blue suit having suspender-looking shoulder overlaps, but they were part of the material of the outfit. They were not suspenders. He was not unkind, Ted reported, which lessened some of his fear. He felt a bit of compassion for him, or he thought he did. He seemed in a subservient position to the 7 to 8 foot tall reptile who was in charge on that platform. What stood out to him is that this subservient figure wore over that jumpsuit a brilliantly coloured robe of the most beautiful shade of purple and emerald green. It was dazzling, Ted reported. It was one of the things that he remembered first when he recalled his event. It's as if it was intended for him to remember these colours. Jump ahead now, when Ted is in his early teens. Reportedly, he is 14 years old. His house is located across the street from a public school. On the school playground, which was not more than 200 feet from his house, a UFO sat down during the night. 3 aliens he described as short and tall greys. They came into his bedroom and took him across the street on what appeared to be a surfboard-looking device. Once inside the ship, he saw human bodies of himself and several of his classmates that also lived nearby. The bodies were floating lifelessly inside clear tubes filled with liquid. There were several small greys operating the system. The overseer in charge was a tall figure draped in purple and green robes. He couldn't remember if this figure was a grey, reptoid, or mantis. Its face was screened so heavily he couldn't remember exactly what it looked like, but his gut told him mantis. However, this time the colours of green and purple were not so brilliant. They were softer shades. Although under hypnosis he was not able to see the event in its entirety, he assumed from seeing these bodies that it was the second time that they cloned him. The after effects led him to a several-year period of emotional despair as he sought after a relationship with a girl who would never be his girlfriend. He thought he was being visited by angels. This was what he felt they programmed him to believe with their confusing screen memories and deceptions. He repeatedly asked God during those years why he sent his angels to bring this girl into his life when she wanted nothing to do with him outside of a common school friendship. It was a confusing and painful period in his life. Moving forward now to the year 1969. Ted is 27 years old and he is sharing an apartment with a friend in the hometown of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Mike is his name and he is approaching graduation from the University of Alabama School of Computer Science, where he will soon receive his MA in computer programming. One night after midnight, Ted woke to find an apparition appearing to him near the foot of his bed. As it slowly materialized and spoke to him telepathically, it took the form of a large black woman who reminded him of Mammy from Gone with the Wind. The attire she wore was a dress or robe of absolutely glimmering shades of purple and emerald green. The colours jumped out at him as if demanding his attention. They sparkled. They looked as if they were in 3D. It was mesmerizing to see. However, he was terrorized. He thought his heart would absolutely jump from his chest. Although the figure insisted that he not get too close and to not touch, and that she was not there to hurt him, he was in a complete state of panic. Against her instructions, he approached cautiously, and he slowly made his way towards the door where she stood. It was his only way out, and he wanted to make an escape. He wanted to get to the other bedroom where Mike would help him defend should the need arise. He reached to touch her there at the bedroom doorway, and as he did, she vanished right into the wall before his eyes. Immediately he bounded through the door into the hallway, screaming out for Mike's help. He rushed into the hallway with his wits scared out of him. He followed Ted into the living room where he was turning on lights. He was so shaken that he wasn't making much sense as he tried to explain. Mike, being the good friend that he was, he stayed awake with Ted the rest of the night, while they nervously paced the floor trying to make sense of what had happened. Years later, even under the guidance of Barbara Bartholik's regression techniques, he was never able to get past the screen memory to see what had occurred to him that night. It seems to be blocked completely. However, Ted reported that the mammy was real and she spoke telepathically to him. From this point we move on to another event. It is 1975 and Ted is living in a typical old southern house with a large veranda. It is in Clayton County, Georgia, a suburban or bedroom community to Atlanta, and center of Margaret Mitchell's epic novel Gone with the Wind. One night, while alone, Ted had another event. He says, "In my innocence of spiritual manipulations, I never at any time associated that previous event with Mammy as to the present event." Mammy had visited Ted in 1969, and at the time he mentioned Mitchell's book, saying that his Mammy figure reminded him somewhat of the character in Gone with the Wind. Now, years later, he's living right in the middle of where it happened. He was having a lot of nightly activity and he was not resting. Ted found it more and more difficult to sleep alone in the house. Gertrude, his trainer for spiritual advancement, has suggested he set up a card table with a typewriter on it in case he woke up during the night and wanted to quickly type out what may have just occurred, before he would go back into a deep sleep and lose that memory, which is something that happened often. He woke up around midnight. This memory is vague, he reported. It was as if he was in a dense fog. Nothing was clear to him, but he remembered sitting down at the typewriter. He woke the next morning and went to go for coffee and breakfast in a nearby cafe. It was 2 or 3 hours later that he noticed a paper on the typewriter. He picked it up and was amazed to find a short story written about a little boy named Carly Kane. This story is included in Masquerade of Angels. Years later, when Carla Turner and Ted Royce were putting together Masquerade of Angels, neither of them made the connection that he identified Carla Turner at the time in 1975. Carly was one letter off from being Carla, and he confirmed with Elton Turner, Carla Turner's husband, that she was known in her youth as Candy, and that she was often called by her peers Candy Kane, but he stressed that she hated to be called that. Ted remembered that he had been lost in a fog at the apartment where he lived before moving to his house. He remembered that it left him an emotional wreck and that he was still dealing with his trauma. Then it happened again this night. He was told that he shouldn't fear the fog, for great things come out of the fog. He was told that Margaret Mitchell had experienced this fog, which helped her write Gone with the Wind. Ted did later get confirmation that Margaret had confided to a friend of this experience, and that it gave her the idea to make her Scarlet get lost in a fog in the novel. Vaguely, he consciously remembered seeing a shimmering purple and emerald green image fading into his bedroom wall. At that time, the only message he saw was that he should embrace the fog and not to fear it, and that good things would happen for him if he did. Ted tried based on these unclear memories of that night, but it didn't work for him. His emotional state continued to erode. But did he point out Carla Turner that night, years before they would meet? Was Carly Kane just a coincidence? He never dreamt of a book in his future. Mitchell is a famous author, and now Carla Turner is a famous author. Sure, Masquerade of Angels is not another Gone with the Wind, but it is affecting people's lives just like it did. Another event happened again in 1989 in Shreveport. Nightly events were happening to him again. Ted was not able to sleep soundly unless he had someone in the house with him. Tired, exhausted from lack of adequate rest, he screamed out for the spirits to leave him alone and to go bother the neighbours. And they did that very thing. And afterwards they asked him if he was pleased. They came during the night and took him through his bedroom wall to a nearby craft. He rode the surfboard-looking device. Again, inside was about 20 more or less of his neighbours and their children. The adults were separated from the children. The adults were put into a small theatre-sized viewing room. The children were then sent into an area that could be viewed. They were told that they were going to meet the purple and green Barney character they had been seeing on television. Barney had become embedded into American culture. In fact, so much that people were beginning to wear clothing made of this unusual colour combination. Then Barney came into where the children were anxiously waiting. Only this Barney was not purple and green. The Barney was a small reptoid creature that was a real dinosaur. What happened was indescribable, Ted reports. This dinosaur ran down the children and ate them. The scene was devastating, and the adult parents and neighbours had no choice but to watch the massacre of their children. He learned years later that these adults were still suffering from the trauma they experienced that night, even though they did not remember those details. He got the details under hypnosis with Barbara. One of the children confirmed the details without being under hypnosis, recalling that a UFO had abducted many people from the area that night. Ted hasn't had a purple and green abduction event since that night in Shreveport, 1989. Now, listeners, we move on to the story of Bruce Cornet and how his case is connected with the case of Ted Rice through the purple and green colours. Bruce's life has been marked by numerous abductions since his early childhood, where he found himself subjected to tests by the mysterious grey beings. The plot thickens during a school trip to Amsterdam in the 1960s, where Bruce encounters a charming woman named Maya. And if many of you are familiar with Ted Rice's case, you'll also know that Ted encountered a mysterious woman named Maya. Captivated by Maya's energy and aura, Bruce forges an immediate connection with her, opting to befriend this mysterious woman. Bruce never truly unravels the layer of Maya's mystery. When asked about her dwelling, where she lived, her responses are shrouded in cryptic simplicity, revealing in the mountains, with a later clarification that she resides in the Andes Mountains. It would only be years later that Bruce would begin to suspect that Maya might be of reptilian origin. Fast forward in Bruce's journey, he marries a remarkable woman named Bonnie. Their 7-year union concludes tragically with Bonnie's passing. In a twist of the extraordinary, Bonnie confides in Bruce, revealing herself as an extraterrestrial being. Astonishingly, she demonstrates telekinesis, moving objects with her mind. Bonnie's death on January 12, 1991 is marked by a profound event. Bruce witnesses, projected onto a stone pillar at her grave by a UFO, the colours emerald green and purple. Bruce believes that this cosmic display is a welcome sign from Bonnie's extraterrestrial friends, indicating her royal status. Now let's take a look at how these events have made their way into pop culture without us even knowing. This is a commercial from the early 2000s. It's a quiet evening while the children are in bed. Suddenly, a man dressed as a grape bursts through the bedroom wall shouting, "I'm going to grape you in the mouth." The children start to run in terror. The man is sporting purple and green colours. The whole scene is very reminiscent of an alien abduction. But of course, the aliens have the ability to pass through walls and don't need to break them down. The commercial continues with the executives debating whether "I'm going to grape you in the mouth" is appropriate for the mascot to say. It's an obvious play on words with grape and rape. Today this commercial probably wouldn't be made. Listeners, this is a TikTok video I came across. It's Halloween and this kid is dressed as an alien. The alien costume is green while wearing a purple cape. He's dragging another kid away. The kid being taken doesn't look too happy and cries in terror. Barney the dinosaur is a fictional character who is the main protagonist of the children's show Barney and Friends. The show was created by Cheryl Leach and first aired in 1992. Barney is a large and purple Tyrannosaurus Rex who comes to life through the imaginations of children. He is known for his friendly and optimistic personality. This TV show was created 3 years after the neighborhood abduction Ted Rice described in Masquerade of Angels. Hocus Pocus is a 1993 American comedy fantasy film directed by Kenny Ortega. The story revolves around 3 witches, the Sanderson sisters. They are resurrected in Salem, Massachusetts on Halloween night. The witches, Winifred, Sarah, and Mary, were executed in the 17th century for participating dark magic and sucking the life force out of children to maintain their youth. A teenage boy named Max, his younger sister Danny, and Max's crush Allison accidentally bring the witches back to life when they explore an old abandoned house on Halloween. Max, Danny, and Allison must work together to stop the witches from carrying out their plan to suck the life force out of all the children in Salem to become immortal. This film is a mix of comedy, fantasy, and adventure, and it has become a cult classic, especially around Halloween. Known for its humour, memorable characters, and entertaining storyline. Throughout this movie, the witches are either wearing green clothes or purple capes or purple hats. They are often depicted flying through the air like UFOs. They even have a song that is meant to lure children to their death.
Guy, bring the little brats to die!
Come, little children, I'll take thee away into a land of enchantment. Come, little children, the time's come to play here in my garden of magic.
These aliens have been influencing our society for many years. How many of you are familiar with the colours of Mardi Gras? The colours green, purple and gold are associated with Mardi Gras, and they have historical significance in the celebration. The tradition of using these colours dates back to the late 19th century in New Orleans, Louisiana. The colours were chosen by the Crew of Rex, one of the oldest Mardi Gras crews. The Crews of Rex selected the colours in 1872, and each colour was given a symbolic meaning. Purple represents justice, green represents faith, gold represents power. These colours were chosen to reflect the values of Mardi Gras celebration and add a sense of regality to the festivities. Over time, these colours have become integral to the visual identity of Mardi Gras, and you'll often see them in decorations, costumes, and other aspects of the celebration. In this video, I used the case of Ted Rice and Bruce Cornet. While researching this, I had others come forward and mention seeing the same colours during their own events, but didn't think too much about it, concentrating more on what the aliens were doing during the abduction and the types of devices they used. Aliens wearing robes of emerald green and purple might be considered laughable by people who don't believe the phenomenon is happening. They might think that it's too much of a human construct to be taken seriously, maybe not realizing that in fact it is an alien construct.